Raider Nation, I want you to call the shots. Should the Raiders draft Michael Penix Jr.? Type D for draft, type P for pass. Coming up here on today's show is my plan that Telesco and Antonio Pierce need to look at if they legitimately want to draft the quarterback out of Washington. Raider Nation, what's going on? It's Mitchell Renz here, host of the Raiders Report, and today's show is presented by Panda Subs. Use code Raiders to save 20% off at pandasubs.com. And these guys have been around for about 4 years now on this show, owned and operated by a Raiders fan. So if you're a big believer in, hey, I'm going to take care of my own, and you want to take care of yourself, go to pandasubs.com, code Raiders for 20% off. So coming up here, I have put together a list of things, and basically 5 things that the Raiders need to do if they plan on drafting Michael Penix Jr. I made this show because I've made so many videos over the course of this month, 2 months around the Raiders potentially trading up for Jayden Daniels. We know that that is not very likely to happen. Can it still happen? Of course it can still happen. But I'm a big believer that you got to put some plans together. And if we know that Jayden is plan A, well then I want the Silver and Black to start putting a plan together for plan B for Michael Penix Jr. because realistically, it's not too much different from Jayden. It's just how you end up executing that from top to bottom. Now, the reason why that I'm talking about this is because if you were to ask me which QB do I believe is the most likely to get drafted by the Raiders on draft night, I'm saying it's Penix because it's the easiest guy that you're going to be able to get at 13. I do think that McCarthy, Drake Maye, Caleb Williams, Jayden Daniels are all gone in the top 10. So this is the one QB that I would say is the most likely and the best option for you to get at pick number 13. The Raiders, they met with Penix for a top 30 visit. They were at his pro day, and I know that they want to find that franchise quarterback. I know that this is a team that values mobility, and a lot of people said, oh, he can't run. Dude just ran a 4.5 40 at his own pro day. He's not a mobile, he's not going to tuck it and run it, but he does have that ability to do it. He can throw it all over the football field. I think he would be a pretty good pairing in an offense that Luke Getsy likes to end up running. So when you look at some of the numbers that this guy has put up over the past 2 seasons, the biggest red flag on him was the injuries. Is he going to be able to stay healthy? Are the Raiders going to be able to keep him upright? And based on the medical checks from the combine and from his pro day, nobody is worried anymore, it seems like, around Penix and the medical. You're always going to have ACL issues, but if everything checks out and if reports are true that NFL teams are not worried about the injuries, Penix could end up being the steal of this draft. And one of the guys that I really evaluate or value their opinion on quarterbacks and players in general, Lance Zierlein. This is what he had to say on Michael Penix Jr. Penix will be a 24-year-old rookie with a history of season-ending injuries at Indiana and an impressive production while at Washington. The Huskies' offense design helped declutter coverages for Penix, allowing him to throw a higher number of intermediate and deep passes. He plays with smart pocket mobility and a willingness to get rid of the football, which makes it difficult to sack him. His delivery is bundled and his release point is very low, but his monster game against Texas showed flashes of impeccable touch. Penix has plenty of arm, but needs to work with more consistent timing between the numbers to eliminate unnecessary contested throws. He's a pocket passer who was ineffective in 2023 when defenses were able to crank up the heat and make him move his feet. Playing in a shotgun-based spread attack might give him the best chance to succeed, but he needs to prove he can thrive outside of the Washington offense and stay free of injury. Now, everything that Zierlein says in there, I do agree. And when you look at that tape from him at Texas, you're like, that's like the best quarterback I've ever seen in college. He was unbelievable in that Texas game. Then Michigan, they crank up the heat. They get after him a little bit, and he was definitely a lot more flustered. I think Penix in the right system can be successful. I am curious to see if the Raiders were to draft him, if it's a dude that you let sit for a year and then you hand him the keys to the car the following year. Maybe that's one of the reasons why they brought in a Gardner Minshew. The bottom line, though, is Michael Penix Jr. to the Las Vegas Raiders is gaining steam, and I hope that Telesco and Antonio Pierce have a plan in place. If they don't, well, hey, hit that subscribe button because I got my plan in place. If you guys want videos every single day around the Silver and Black, I got you covered. When breaking news happens, we got you covered. Or you just bleed Silver and Black and you want to hang out with a bunch of Raider fans, there's a reason why we have over 167,000 subs. We got that dedication. We got that commitment to excellence, and hopefully y'all agree with that. So here's my plan if the Raiders want to draft Penix, one of the first things that I'm doing is I'm going to go out and I'm going to sign a corner. And when you think about this timeline, at the moment that I'm making this video, the draft's about 3 weeks away. So leading up to that event, I want to make sure that if I had a certain plan, and for Antonio Pierce, he said finding a cornerback one is a priority. The reason why I'm going to go out and I'm going to sign a corner is because if Penix is going to be your pick, you're probably going to have to take him at 13, or you're going to have to trade back up into the back end of round 1, because I think the days of him being available at pick 44, it's not really going to happen. And if the Raiders want to have to trade up from pick 44, obviously it's going to cost you pick 44, and it's probably also going to cost you pick 77 on top of that. So if Penix is your target, to me, the other thing that you got to potentially think about is, if I'm going to take him at 13, cool. Or if I do want to trade back up, I'm going to take an offensive tackle, probably a right tackle, to protect Penix's blind side. With all that being said, you're not going to get a Quinion Mitchell. You're not going to get a Terrion Arnold. You're probably not going to get a corner in the first 3 rounds of this draft, which means you have to look at free agency. The names that I'm looking at in free agency, the number one name is Xavier Howard. Like, Xavier Howard has ties with Patrick Graham. He's got ties with Rob Leonard. He's got ties with a bunch of Raiders players that are on this team from previous times. With Miami, the best seasons he's ever had. Gerald Alexander was working with the DBs down in Miami, where he had 15 interceptions in 2 seasons. If you don't want to spend so much money on Howard, another name to keep in mind is Adoree Jackson. This is the more of the cheaper type of play. Like, Howard could be a legit cornerback one. I don't know if Adoree Jackson can, and I would look at this as a Meek Robertson replacement. If you told me I got to spend $5 million on Jackson, he can be basically a Meek Robertson for me, a little bit better, that's good money invested. Another name to at least throw out there is Steven Nelson, which doesn't have as many ties, but has played in so many different systems, is 31 years old, can be a reliable veteran, played over 1,000 snaps the past, I want to say 3 seasons, has played in at least 15 games in every year since 2018. So if you wanted to go out and look at those 3 players, those would be the guys that I would sign if you are legitimately considering going out and drafting Michael Penix Jr., going out and even drafting Jayden, because if you end up drafting Jayden or Penix, you're probably not going to have that opportunity to get one of those lockdown corners that you would usually like to try to get in the first round of the draft. Let's go to this next one, and this is a little bit of a weird one, but I want to have a conversation with our offensive line. And to me, you got to be able to have that combo of, are you okay if we rearrange things here based on us potentially drafting a lefty quarterback, because I want somebody, my best offensive lineman, to protect the blind side. So the first question is, I'm going up to Colton Miller, and I'm going, hey, Colton, I know the last time that you played right tackle was at UCLA back in 2016. Are you okay with going and protecting Penix's blind side, playing on the right side? Because typically, right tackles get paid less than left tackles. Why? Blind side, most quarterbacks are right-handed throwers. But if it helps out the team, will Colton Miller do that? If he goes, yeah, man, I'm down. Okay, awesome. If he's not down to do it, that puts even more of a concentration on right tackle. My other question would be, will Dylan Parham play right guard? Like, yeah, you re-signed Jordan Meredith. I don't want Jordan Meredith playing right guard, protecting Penix's blind side. What I want to end up happening is you have then Colton on the right side, you have Parham on the right side, then you got to figure out your left guard situation, and then you got to ask Thayer Munford. Like, Munford I thought looked better on the left side. Hey, Thayer, if Colton's okay playing right, are you okay playing left? With Munford, of course, is going to say yes. Or is he okay with playing an offensive guard position? If your offensive line is not okay doing what's best for the overall team, well, then you might have to stick with Colton on one side, and that makes it even the right tackle spot that much more important that you have to get right in the NFL draft. But I thought this would be a fun question, right? If Michael Penix Jr. is your quarterback and you're protecting his blind side, this is a QB you're drafting up high, who would you have more confidence to protect his blind side? Colton Miller, type KM, who is the left tackle for the Raiders, or Thayer Munford, type TM, who played right tackle last season at times when Jermaine was unable to? Who would you have more confidence in at right tackle? Colton Miller, Thayer Munford? Let me know down below. My answer would be Colton Miller. And to be honest with you, I don't want to say that it's not close, but what's not close is my confidence level in Colton Miller on the right side, Thayer Munford on the left. That's the best scenario, I think, for the Raiders' offensive line. Like, I have more confidence in Colton on the left side than I do Thayer. But in this type of conversation, if I'm going to kick Colton over to the right side, like, I have more confidence in the Raiders' offensive line if Colton's playing right tackle and Thayer's playing left, compared to if Colton's playing left and Thayer's playing on the right side. So if you got to mix and match here a little bit, I'm okay with it. And what I would rather have is Dylan Parham get kicked over to the right side as well. Your best offensive lineman should be protecting your blind side, especially when they're a quarterback like Penix, who has shown you that, you know what, when he gets pressured, he's a little bit of a different QB. Next thing that I'm going to do here is I'm going to target an offensive tackle at pick number 13. If you're going to be in Vegas, sometimes you got to roll the dice. And I will continue to say, if you want to take down Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs, if you want to be that next Super Bowl caliber team, sometimes you got to take a few risks. And if I'm the Raiders, I am taking the best offensive tackle at pick number 13. And if somebody like Olu Fashanu is there, somebody like a Joe Alt slides to you at 13, you draft them and you say, hey, Colton, you're going to the right side. Hey, Thayer, you're going to end up playing offensive guard. We'll figure it out from there on out. Or you just draft Talisi Fuaga, you draft a J.C. Latham, you put them on the right side, let them cook at offensive tackle, and with that equation, then this is where you already know that you're probably going to have to trade back up into the back end of the first round, give it up pick 44, give it up pick 77, and then you got to go get your quarterback in Penix Jr. because he's not going to be there at pick 44. The reason why, though, that I am targeting offensive tackles in the draft is because tackles in this year's draft are much stronger than what they are in free agency. And if you want to find an extra offensive lineman in free agency, I would just go sign somebody cheap like a Dalton Reisner, put them at left guard. If you're like, no, I'm confident in Thayer, I'm confident in Colton Miller playing the tackles, well, then go sign Dalton Reisner, put him at left guard, and then kick Dylan Parham over to the right guard spot. But to me, I'm thinking, what do I want? I want the best offensive line possible. To me, the best offensive line that the Raiders can possibly put on the field, and if Telesco's a guy that wants to win in the trenches, it starts with a Talisi Fuaga at right tackle, and then a Dylan Parham at guard, a Thayer Munford at guard, an Andre James at center, a Colton Miller at tackle. I want somebody like a J.C. Latham, an Amarius Mims, a Tyler Guyton. Like, these would be names. These would be the two names that I would like to be able to get at 13. If the Raiders wanted to, okay, hear me out, wanted to draft Penix at 13, wouldn't be the idea that I would go with, but wanted to potentially look at one of these other options as a potential trade-up for candidate. Could be names in Amarius Mims, Tyler Guyton. And then the other one where if you're like, well, I got to trade up for Penix, could I potentially get a Roger Rosengarter, the dude who already protected Penix's blind side at Washington? Could you get him in round 3? Maybe round 4. And that's where you could target it. If I'm the Raiders, these are the top right tackles that I'm looking for these are the top right tackles I'm looking for in the draft, based on value, based on fit, especially if you're playing as a draft Penix. All right, so we got some more coming up here in just a minute, but I do want to give you guys a little bit of love here and a shout out to our sponsor, Panda Subs. And Panda Subs, I think, has the best tasting protein on the market. My new favorite protein, and I don't care where you guys get your protein from, Panda Subs, this fuel and their mint chocolate chip, it's unbelievably good, and I can't even tell you how good it is. Like, when you eat it, you literally like, there's no way this is healthy for me. Best part is, it is 30 grams of protein. You're only looking at about 150 calories per scoop. I also love it because it's multi-stage protein, and some of you are like, what does that mean? Like, I can eat it after a workout, and I feel like it fuels your body, fuels your muscles, get the most bang for your buck. On top of that, though, I've been trying to lose some weight, and I've been looking for meal replacements. And during the week recently, I'll be honest with y'all, Monday through Thursday, I try to eat nothing besides Panda Subs protein shakes. And over the past 2.5 weeks, now Easter kind of kicked my butt here, but over the last 2.5 weeks, I've lost close to 15 to 20 pounds. And sometimes when I do things, I go a little bit crazy, but I also love all Panda Subs protein, whether it's their chocolate, their vanilla, their fruity, their cinnamon toast, their mint chocolate chip. I mean, these guys put out products that I think once you try it, you're like, all right, yeah, I get why Mitch has been talking about these guys for 4 years. Go give it a shot. The link's going to be available to y'all down in the comments and down in the description of today's show. Shout out to Panda Subs for hooking up the nation. Remember, code Raiders, 20% off, pandasubs.com. All right, we're going to keep this thing rolling with my plan to go get Michael Penix Jr. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to trade a defensive tackle on our roster. And there's a few names that I can entertain, but there are really like 2 names that I am picking up the phone and I'm going, who wants these guys? I'm going to try to trade them because the Las Vegas Raiders have really solid depth at the defensive tackle position, which I laugh saying because I just can't even believe I'm saying it. And I'm happy that I finally get to say it. But you decided to invest your money and Christian Wilkins. You also decided to bring back John Jenkins, Adam Butler, two of your best defensive tackles last season. And based on, reports, based on everything that I hear, Tyree Wilson's going to get some run at the defensive tackle spot as well, which means, what does that mean for a Byron Young, a Marquand McCall, a Matthew Butler, a Nesta Jade-Silvera? Call me crazy, but due to the connections that Nesta Jade-Silvera has, I actually think that he has a better shot of coming back. And then Marquand McCall is such a massive human being that was signed by Antonio Pierce when he took over. There's a part of me that wonders if he's going to retain. So, the two names to me that you're probably going to get the most value from out of those four names, the first one is Byron Young, who the Raiders drafted in round 3 just last season out of Alabama. The fact that he was a third-round pick, the fact that he's from Alabama tells me that you probably can get a 6th-round pick value for Byron Young. And, yeah, you're going to have to eat a little bit of money. So what? Let's say you get a 6th-round pick for Young, and you're going to have to trade. Let's say you traded up pick 44, pick 77, and you had less draft picks early on. If I was the Raiders, then I'm trying to stockpile some of those extra 6th-rounders, some of those extra 7th-rounders to make up for some of the potential picks that I've lost due to my trade up for a Michael Penix Jr. And then you could do what the Raiders have kind of done in years past, where they're like, all right, I got 2 6s, I got 2 7s, I'm going to trade up and move back up into the 5th round to get a certain player that I really like. So Byron Young is one name to go out there and throw out there. The other name that I'll say is Matthew Butler. And, Butler was one of those guys that we did a video on him probably at this point last offseason, almost a whole year ago, and we were like, Matthew Butler and Neil Farrell Jr. aren't going to be on the Raiders 53-man roster. People got mad at us. It was something that we were told by a player, essentially. And Matthew, from what I understand, has started to do a better job of going out there and proving that he wants to be there. But, also actions speak louder than words. And the Raiders' actions this offseason told me that they're not very confident in Matthew Butler and Byron Young. So if you don't know if they're going to make the roster, trade them for literally anything, and then you can use those draft picks on just extra bodies based on picks that you might lose trying to go up and get a QB. The last thing that I'm going to do is more of a smoke screen, but I kind of want AP to do a little bit of a better job. Don't get me wrong. It makes my job easier when they speak their truths because they're like, we want Jayden Daniels, and they have not shied away from that. Everybody in the world knows that the Raiders want Jayden. So why don't we start hyping up some other quarterbacks? You kind of saw AP do it the other day with J.J. McCarthy, where he's like, oh, he's no doubt a top 3 quarterback. He's a national champion. I want them to start hyping up Bo Nix, J.J. McCarthy. Hell, I want them to hype up everybody that's not named Jayden Daniels and not named Penix, because I don't think that they're going to get Drake Maye. I know that they're not going to get Caleb Williams. But in my scenario, the way that the Raiders failed this year's draft is if they take J.J. McCarthy at pick 13 or if they take Bo Nix in the 1st round. If you do one of those things, to me, you're going to get an F grade from me from my Raiders mock draft, from a Raiders draft standpoint. And I really, really hope that that doesn't happen. So because of that, to avoid the Raiders not setting themselves back, hype up Bo, hype up McCarthy, take all the attention away from Michael Penix Jr., make people think that you don't even want him. Then you swoop in, and then you end up taking him. So in conclusion, the Raiders, they got to have a plan B. You got to be ready in case the glass breaks of emergency. You need to have all of your options out there. But I also do believe that the Raiders can't just sit around until draft day and then make their decisions. Let's start being a little bit proactive here, Silver and Black. And, let's go out and do some of the things that I mentioned. Signing a corner, adding a little bit more depth on your offensive line. Yeah, they kind of did it in Jordan Meredith, but I want even more depth. I want you to have that conversation with your O-line. Are you guys okay switching around? Because I don't want to draft Penix with the idea that, yeah, Colton Miller is going to be okay with it, and then you find out that he's not okay with it. That's not a good recipe for success. This allows the Raiders to not trade the farm for a quarterback, which is one of the things that is becoming more and more likely for the Raiders on why they might end up picking Michael Penix Jr. in 2024.